Did you go to a restaurant or no? When he leaves, yeah. Yeah, my daughter lives in Red Bank, so we go there a lot and go out to the restaurants. It's always crowded. It's always
As I
hard
was
to find
saying,
parking
even on a
places.
quiet night, you can't. Years ago, one councilman flipped it. Parking lot they're gonna build in the back. And then swap it out. One guy flipped it.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting of May 22nd, 2019. Will everyone please stand for a salute to the flag? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Here.
Mr. Henry?
Here.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Here.
Mr. Corrigan? Here. Mr. Savili?
Here.
Mr. Esposito?
Here.
Mr. Foley?
Here.
Mr. Kemp?
Here.
Mr. Barry?
Here.
Mr. Cornell?
Before we start this meeting, I want to read a letter that I received on May the 13th, 2019. It is from our board member, Maria Catello. The letter is as follows. Dear Chairman Green, please accept this letter as a formal notification that I am resigning from my position on the Saraville Board of Adjustment. Thank you for the opportunity to serve the residents of Saraville in this capacity. Unfortunately, due to my health issues, it has been harder to prepare for and attend meetings. I feel it is not fair to the board, its members, and the residents of Saraville if I continue to be absent. Please let me know if there's anything else I can do to help during this transition. I wish the Board of Adjustment continued success, and I hope to stay in touch with the friends I've made there over the years. Sincerely, Maria Catello. I am in a process now of attempting to fill her position, and at the next meeting or the following meeting, I will advise the board of the progress with this appointment. Also, I want to notice that this meeting has been satisfied in accordance with Chapter 231 PL 1975 by advertising in the Home News Tribune, notifying the Sentinel Publishing Company and the Star Ledger, and also posting on the bulletin board and filing with the Borough Clerk. Our first application this evening will be case number 19-07, Lisa Marcello. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Marcelino.
Come.
Good evening.
Good evening, Ms. Marcel. Just need to swear you in.
Yes,
You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And just explain to the board what you're here for, what you need.
Sure. I'm requesting a variance for my home to be replaced. The current home is from 1913. It's outlived its use. We've contacted many architects, we've contacted contractors, and the floors and such are pretty much considered unlivable at this point. They're sloped, the walls are bowing, so we're trying to replace the existing structure with another structure, and I provided the plan for you to review, proposing a two-story home so that my family can remain in Sayreville. We want to stay here, and I have a family, I have 3 kids. The current home is not suitable for us based on various repairs that would have to be made. It's more expensive to repair than it would be to replace at this point. Also, my house doesn't meet the current regulations, the codes. I've been told numerous times about the setbacks and things such, so it prevents us from doing what we would like to do.
Let me ask you, ma'am, was it some time ago, refresh my memory, did you come before this board in reference an application to put on an addition?
Yes, yes. I believe it was 2014 or 2015. Our plan was to square off the existing structure and to put an addition to kind of fix some of the damage that, you know, from the house being so old. When we did contact the contractors and got their opinion was that it wouldn't make sense to fix just one part of the house when other parts of the house would eventually deteriorate further. So it just didn't make sense. So yes, we did, and we did get approved for the squaring off. And then we decided after contacting various people, professionals, that it just wouldn't be feasible. So at this point, that's why we're asking to replace the structure.
So you're going to demolish the structure that's presently there
Yes,
and put a new foundation in?
yes.
Brand new house?
Brand new house, yeah.
Board have any questions?
I have one, Chair. Could you tell us, is the footprint of the new house going to be the same footprint as the current house?
No, it would actually meet the required setbacks for front and back, according to today's regulations. As far as the sides, the house is gonna be shrunk. It's gonna be 15.9 wide instead of 23 or 24, whatever it is existing right now. So it's shrinking, so there'll be more space on both sides, so my neighbors wouldn't be so close to me. We'd actually have a little bit extra room in between.
You don't happen to have any pictures of, like, renderings as opposed to just the plans? I was just curious from a standpoint, because it's a prefab that's going in, right?
Yes, I believe there was a diagram of a two-story included.
I got the diagram, I was just wondering if they had pictures of it.
I don't believe it's in your packet, but I could provide those if necessary.
No, probably my own curiosity. No, the plans look nice. Thank you.
Any other questions of the board?
Chairman, if I may, it's a very technical legal issue, so I'm going to give you some super easy questions.
Okay.
The houses that are on either side of you and behind you, right? There's houses, and those are big houses on small lots as well. Kind of what you have existing, right?
The house that's on one side of me is small like mine. The one on the very next side of me is a modular, actually. It was put there in the 90s. So it would be comparable to that, because it is going to be a modular. So it wouldn't, you know, so yes and no. It matches on one side, the other side would be a little different.
Yeah, and as far as you can tell, all the properties are about the same size
Oh,
as
yes.
yours, right?
Yes, we looked into that. Each property in the area, in the immediate area of us adjacent, are about 25 to 100, 25 by 100. So ours is 25 by 92. So they're very small, narrow lots to work with. So that's why we're trying to shrink the house and just build upward.
I understand. Yeah, so I'll explain to the board why I asked you that question. The reason is the law says if you have an undersized lot, you need to send notices to neighboring property owners to ask them if they would either give them a piece of their property so that you can make yours conforming or less conforming. And here it's not possible because all the other houses are developed and their lots are undersized as well. So if I was to give you a piece of my lot, I'd make mine worse. So in those instances, I suggest the board waive that technical legal requirement because it would be futile to send those notices because everyone would say no. So that overcomes some of the hurdle on looking at the variances required. And then also, as Jay noted to me, and I don't want to steal his thunder, if you do look at the plans on the right side, it shows in light gray the existing footprint of the house versus the dark black as to the new footprint. And as the applicant indicated, the side yard setbacks, even though she still needs a variance with the new set up, it's better than it was before. So there's not a huge change. And again, a legal issue is, once you demolish the existing structure, you don't get the benefit of the existing variances. If she was just to keep it in place, put an addition on, something like that, then we say, oh, those are non-conforming existing variances. But again, legally, once you demolish the house, it's a blank slate, and you need all the variances that are listed in Mr. Mashansky's report. Somewhat of a technical matter, but it is a legal issue. Thank you.
Any other questions? If there's no other questions from the,
Can we just go over the variances? Maybe John can do that?
Sure. So we have a variance for the insufficient front yard setback, which is a requirement for a 20-foot setback, but then also a provision where you can match the prevailing setbacks along the frontage. But in this case, we have an 8-foot setback where 20 feet is required. There's side yard setbacks on both sides where 8 feet are required. One side is 4 feet, the other side is 5.5 feet. As was discussed in the testimony and review so far, the existing setbacks in both cases on the sides are less than what's proposed, so the conditions are improving. And we have a combined side yard setback, 20-foot total between the two sides, or we have 9.5 feet provided. The structure exceeds the maximum building coverage, 20% maximum permitted, where 37% is proposed. And then we have an undersized lot, as we were just discussing, where a 75-foot wide lot with 7,500 square feet of area is required. We have a 25-foot wide lot with 2,300 square feet in area. And there's also a requirement that new structures on undersized lots in the R7 zone have 100 feet in depth, and we have 92 feet in depth. So 3 variances related to the undersized lot, 3 variances related to the side yard setbacks, the building coverage, and the front yard setback.
any other questions of the board? If I have no other questions, I'm going to open this application up to the public. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this application, 21 Cliff Avenue?
Chairman, I move the public portion be closed.
Public portion is closed. What's the pleasure of the board concerning this application?
Chairman, I move the application be granted as presented.
I have a motion and a second to approve this application. Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan? Yes. Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. Savili?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes, just to note that it's 211 Cliff.
My hat.
What's that? That's what you had, no, because Ron
I made a mistake in that.
mentioned 21, I just want.
21 is 211.
21 wasn't going in any record.
Okay, your application's been approved.
Thank you so much.
That's okay. The next application is 19-09. Victor DiGirello.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Need to swear you in. You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please, again, tell the board why you're here and what you were requesting.
I'm requesting, I was here in January, and the board okayed the variances that I needed to put this house up. When we started there, that was the entire plan, and what happened was the foundation that was in there is not suitable. I had an engineer come in, he said it would cost me more to try and correct it. The easiest thing would be put a new foundation in.
I'm requesting to put a new foundation in with the exact footprint of what I put in. I don't want to change the footprint at all. It's just that I need to put a foundation in because because of the cost there, it's easier to do that. In other words, it'll be a new construction. I'm going to demolish it completely, and we're going to use the exact same footprint of what you have and just put a foundation in.
So you're gonna rebuild the house, or are you just raising the house and?
No, we're rebuilding the house there. You should have the plans there of exactly, I'm not changing anything there. We were going to use the existing foundation, and we can't, so I have to put a foundation in.
You can't, you just don't wanna raise it?
Because there's no footings under the old brick foundation,
That's fine.
and that's what that is.
So, does this require a variance? Is because he's demolishing it? Okay.
The same as the last application, once he demolishes it, all variances come back, all of a sudden, so we have to go through that.
Sir, are you keeping the garage? When
I'm
you- when
keeping
you-
exactly the exact plans I put in before is what I'd like to keep, yes.
Okay, so when you came before us in January,
Yes,
you came for a garage, an application for a garage. That's going to stay just the way it
yes,
is?
there's nothing changing at all, sir.
So nothing's changing at all except that your new
Putting a
foundation?
foundation in underneath the house, that's it.
Okay.
And building a new house.
Yes,
Right, tearing down an old house,
Yes.
building a new house.
Is the house going to be the same square footage,
it's going to be exactly the same. We're not changing anything at all.
height and everything else?
Same thing,
Roof lines, things like that?
roof line, everything.
Any other questions of the board?
Chairman, sorry. Just same questions we discussed with the prior applicant, because once you demo the building, all the variances you need come back. So same thing, all the properties in your neighborhood are about the same size and the houses are about the same size?
Yes.
So it would be possible for you to buy a sliver off the neighbor's property, because then theirs would become non-conforming. So again, with the prior application, in such a situation, recommend the board waive the formal sending of notices regarding purchasing neighboring properties or portion of properties to make this application conforming or less non-conforming due to the existing build-out of the neighborhood. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? No further questions. I open this application up to the public. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this application, 16 Outlook Avenue? Yes, sir.
Hi, sorry.
You've got to come up to the microphone. Do you swear you in?
Sure,
You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And if you give us your name, put your hand in. You can give us your name, spell your last name,
Mitch Albala, A-L-B-A-L-A,
and your address, sir.
14 Outlook Avenue.
Thank you. Please continue.
Yeah, I just wanted clarification on what was going on with that property because it was next to mine. So it's basically just a matter of he's going to be tearing down the existing structure, doing a new foundation, putting a new house up in the same area. Nothing else is going to change.
Well, if you look at the house the way it is today, when
I've seen it.
the gentleman came in the beginning of the year, there's a small portion against Lot 44, I'm not sure if that's you, that there's doing a small addition, which kind of squares off the house a little bit, and he's putting a garage in the backyard, which was already approved in January. So he's just going to build all that, but everything brand new versus trying to rehabilitate what's there.
Okay, it might have been then what you said as far as like redoing that border? Is that what's happening?
No, there's a little, like, kind of a jog in the house if you're looking at it from the street,
Okay,
and just a little bit of space to kind of fill in that jog area. There's a small addition going there.
oh,
See the purple? Purple. Oh, John's got it. Yes. So that purple will be new, and then the garage in the back will be new. But everything will be brand new versus trying to rehab what's there.
okay. And the area of the property itself?
No, that'll stay
the
exactly the
same.
same.
Great, all right, thank you.
Thank you for coming out.
Anyone else from the public wish to speak on this application?
I move the public portion be closed.
Public portion is closed. What's the pleasure of the board concerning this application, 16 Outlook Avenue?
Make a motion, we approve the application.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve this application. Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. Savili? Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Okay, the application's been approved. At next month's meeting, it will be memorialized, and at that time, you can go to the construction office and pick up your necessary permits.
Thank you very much.
Next application on the agenda is 19-06, Pharos at 879 Upper Main Street.
Good, Counsel.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members, board professionals. My name is Chiara Mancini, and I come from the firm of Heilbrunn Pape, and I have the honor and the privilege of representing Pharos Enterprises LLC with regard to this application. This application is for a use variance to permit a business office in an existing residential structure, together with a minor site plan application with a waiver of the site plan elements. This application does not propose any site improvements or changes to the existing site. I will begin by calling Andrew French, PE of French and Perillo, to testify as to the existing conditions of the site. Mr. French's testimony will not go further as the existing conditions because, as I said, there are no proposed improvements. Next, we will address the remaining items in the board engineer's review letter, last updated today's date, May 22nd, 2019. I will then call Allison Coffin, professional planner, to testify and to address the requirements that must be met for the board to grant this use variance. The owner of Pharos Enterprises, Paul Zaparou, is here today. I do not intend to call him, but if the board so wishes, I will swear him in. He will answer your questions. Mr. Chairman, oh, go ahead.
Okay, proceed.
Drew?
Being sworn, you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please give us your name, spell your last name, and your place of business.
Yes, Andrew French, F-R-E-N-C-H. I work for French and Perello Associates. We're a consulting engineering firm in Wall Township, New Jersey.
Thank you, Counselor.
Mr. French, can you share your educational and professional qualifications with the board?
Yes, certainly.
Oh, sorry. Oh, you want us to use the dual mics? Okay. Yeah. I'll repeat my question. Mr. French, can you please share your educational and professional qualifications with the board?
Certainly. I am a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. I have a Bachelor of Science of Engineering from NJIT. I provided expert testimony for site engineering throughout the state and in front of this board several years ago.
Make a motion, we accept his credentials.
Second the motion.
Proceed.
Thank you very much.
I would like to start by having Mr. French go through the existing conditions of the property and take us around some of the surrounding properties.
Okay, we have an exhibit that I'd like to put on the record.
Certainly. Is it the same plans that were submitted, or is, nope, that will need to mark then.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
If you could mark that as A-1 with this evening's date.
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this exhibit is a 500-foot aerial plan.
Can you turn it?
Yes.
See it? Thanks.
Is that good?
Yep.
So this is titled 500-Foot Aerial Plan for Pharos Enterprises LLC, and it's dated May 20th, 2019. The purpose of this aerial is just to give the surrounding properties and where the location of the property is. The property is actually located in the southeastern portion of the borough. It has frontage on Route 9, and it's located between Charles Street and Lee Avenue. It's within approximately 700 feet of the Garden State Parkway. The property is 0.16 acres, and it's in the R10 residential zone district. The surrounding properties that are also around are in the R10 residential district. I'd like to point out, though, that the Route 9 at this location is a divided highway, so it's only from the property itself is a right turn only, as well as just south of our property, on the other side of Charles Street, there's an existing business that operates right on Route 9 frontage as well.
And moving on with your use variance plan, if you could just...
Sure. So this is the same use variance plan that was submitted to the board as part of the application.
Then you don't need to mark that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the existing conditions of the property, it has an existing 2.5-story structure. It has an existing detached garage, existing driveway. There's sidewalk currently that surrounds the existing structure. In the corner, there's an existing shed. As council has indicated, we're not proposing any site improvements on the property. What we're proposing to do is to convert the residential structure to be an office for a contractor. The contractors would have office space in the first 2 floors, and the basement would be used for storage. The existing garage would be for hand tools and equipment for storage. The existing shed is to be used for maintenance equipment for lawn and snow removal. And there's no proposed site improvements as part of the application. I did want to point out, too, that there's an existing wood fence that encloses the rear and side yard area of the property itself.
Now I would like to go through the remaining outstanding items in Mr. Cornell's letter dated today's date, May 22nd, 2019. With regard to, I'm on the second page of that letter. Bullet A, landscape and lighting, and it says, as per ordinance requirements, a 50-foot wide vegetated buffer is required when a commercial use abuts a residential zone.
Yeah, so the applicant is seeking a waiver from this requirement. The property itself is similar to a residential structure, even with the proposed use. The contractor's office space is only going to have 3 employees. The general hours of operation are 7 to 5 p.m. There's no outdoor activity, so in essence, this is going to be functioning even less intense as a residential use. So, as I mentioned earlier, there is the stockade fence that surrounds the rear yard. The applicant is seeking a waiver from the vegetative buffer requirement.
Could you explain what type of business this is?
It's a contractor's office. So the contractor bids public bid work, and this is just his office that handles the paperwork. There's 3 employees that are there, and basically his job there is to do the contract stuff of his business, prepare the bids, the estimates, do the shop drawings, the schedule, that type of activities in the building. So there's no, contractor storage of outside activities or anything like that. It's just the office.
You wouldn't have equipment ever show up there from a job or anything else like that?
No, that is not intended to be here, correct.
So during the operation, there's 3 employees, they basically show up, work for 8 hours and on site, and then go home?
That is correct.
Or is there coming and going to jobs?
I mean, it's mostly that they're coming here and working for the 8 hours at a time. So there's other employees that are on the construction sites that are working, but they're on the construction sites, not here.
And do those employees come to the site often, the proposed
No,
site?
no.
So the people that are working here will not be going to the job site and vice versa?
Right, they're just the office personnel.
Okay, thank you.
And one last question. And how long has this been going on now?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Since 2010.
No, I started off somewhere else.
Started off somewhere else since 2010.
At this location, how long?
Maybe we could have the owners
Yeah,
sworn
sure.
and we can question them directly. Make it a little bit easier.
Sure.
So just like everyone, just need to swear you in. You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And give us your name, spell your last name.
My name is Paul Zafiriou, Zafiriou.
Thank you. So you just answered the board questions.
Okay. I've been in business since 2010. Originally, I lived there for a little bit, and I was working out of the basement. And then I moved out of there in 2012. It was either 2012 or 2013. And for a little bit of while, it was empty. And then I went back and started working there as my office again. I was kind of going back and forth.
When was that?
In early 2013, I believe it was.
So you've been running a contracting business out of there since, okay.
Yes, sir.
Does anybody live in this house?
Not at this time, no.
When was the last time somebody lived in it?
2012.
And was that you who lived there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So there's no plans for it to be an office and residence at the same time?
No, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
And this will be the only business on this site?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Because if something was, if we were to approve, you realize nobody can't live there again as a
I have
commercial.
no intention of anybody living there, no.
I know the intention, I'm just saying, no.
No problem.
And also, what the board usually does is kind of restrict the business to be your type of business. So in the future, you're gonna be in some tower somewhere because you're so successful. Maybe a dentist wants to move in here, that really won't be allowed because it's gonna be strictly if the board so chooses, usually that's what we do. It's limited to the type of business and sort of the hours of operation and things like that you're requesting. Okay. I don't know if all the board members are amenable to that, but that's usually what we do.
I understand.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have one, Ron. Your application requires a variance for the number of parking spaces. So you have 3 employees who are typically there.
Yep.
No other vehicles are kept on site, or you typically have other vehicles on site that would take up parking spaces that would limit access to your employees?
No.
Okay. And how many employees does your company have in total, not just at this location?
We are a total of 10,
Okay. And
including myself.
are there occasions where more people need to come to the site? Are there specific times of the week or times of any particular day?
No. 99.9% of the time, it's only myself, my secretary, and my estimator.
Just to follow up to that. Because again, we probably put some type of limitations on it, which is what you're describing.
Sure.
So if you were to grow, is it possible you might need 4 or 5 people, or?
If I were to grow, I'd probably have to leave from there. I understand that.
All right, so then, again, we're gonna probably put the restrictions on to what you're testifying now, so you're
Sure.
gonna be limited. Okay, thank you.
I want to call your attention, I don't know if you've read this report, maybe council has, from John Barry, our planner. When you park your cars there, your employees park your cars, you have 4 parking spots.
Yes.
When they leave, do they back out to the highway, or do you have a turning pattern for them to go out?
Yeah, on the plan, you'll see in the front of the structure itself, there's actually a turning area here that gives them the opportunity to turn around, to actually extend and pull out onto Route 9. Route 9 is, at that location, has good sight distance. Again, it's a divided highway, so they're making only a right turn out. And even along the frontage of the property, there's a little shoulder stripe there that gives them a little more opportunity to even emerge in the lane and make that movement.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So the parking is, that driveway right to the right of the house, that's your driveway?
Yes, sir.
So they park there, and then you use the front piece of macadam there to do the turn, okay?
And your hours are Monday through Friday? You don't work Saturdays or Sunday?
No, no, sir.
Okay.
And the parking looks like it's stacked, so you're gonna have to coordinate, but I guess
Yes,
you know what you're doing, right?
yeah.
Is he allowed to build a bigger area for himself to park if he needs to? If he gets another employee or two? Looks like he can take some of the grass up and make some parking. I don't want to inhibit the guy from growing his business, you know?
It's not proposed, the intention is to go through and use this existing driveway, but there is an area between the house and the existing driveway that possibly could be expanded in the future if he had to.
So that would be allowed for him if he needed it?
Well, he'd have to come back, right?
He'd have to come back, yeah.
He also has the option, if you look at the plan, to not use the garage for storage and use that as a parking space if it gets tight. So there's another option in the future.
Just one other follow-up. So we talked about the employees and who's coming and not coming. How about, like, people you're contracting with or people you're dealing with? Do they come to the site to do business?
All of my clients are public entities like yourselves. I do work for municipalities and boards of educations. All my work is public bid. I don't have any clients coming to my office ever, nor architects. It's,
You just have to get it on the record.
I understand.
I have a question. Could you explain why you're in front of us now and not 010?
Like I said before, I was originally living in the house, and I was working out of my basement, and you know, things evolved, and it just slipped away from me, and you know, I didn't it just slipped away, and I didn't come before you, and I apologize for that.
That's a good point. So since 2013, you've been operating with 3 employees there.
Yes,
You've had no issues with parking, and you have no complaints from the neighbors or anything like that regarding your operation?
no, sir, I have good relationship with all my neighbors.
Great, thank you, sir.
You've been operating that business there for 6 years.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
Is there a sign?
No, sir.
Okay.
Counsel, proceed.
Part B of Mr. Cornell's letter. It says information based on proposed hours of operation, number of employees, proposed businesses should be provided. In addition, information on anticipated traffic patterns, deliveries, garbage pickup, etc. I think we went through a lot of that. I think we didn't hit on deliveries and garbage pickup.
Yeah, so deliveries once a month, there's office supplies that are delivered to the site. A couple times a week, there's UPS and Federal Express deliveries to the site. And as far as garbage pickup, the garbage cans go out to the street once a week.
And then, go ahead.
Go.
Pursuant to borough ordinance, all parking lots are to be paved and fully enclosed with either concrete or Belgian block curbing along their perimeter.
Yeah, so the applicant is seeking a waiver. The existing driveway currently is gravel, so we're seeking a waiver to leave it gravel. If the board so chose, the applicant would be willing to pave the driveway.
Number 3, pursuant to borough ordinance, concrete sidewalk is required throughout all parking areas, and the applicant is requesting a waiver from this item as well.
Yeah, so we're seeking a waiver for the sidewalks around the parking areas. As you can see on the plan, though, there is a sidewalk that wraps around the building itself, and there's a connection from the existing driveway to the building. So we think that the sidewalk that is out there is appropriate and sufficient for this use. There's only 3 employees, and it's the same 3 that go there every day. So we're asking for a waiver from that condition. It's a partial waiver.
And then number 4, Pursuant to Borough Ordinance, concrete sidewalk is required along the frontage of the property.
Yeah, so the applicant is seeking a waiver from this as well. When you look on Route 9, on both sides of Route 9, there is no sidewalk. Even in the neighborhoods the streets of Charles and Lee, there is no existing sidewalk, so the applicant is seeking a waiver from providing that.
Number 5, the plan depicts parking in the front yard setback area, which is prohibited by Borough Ordinance, and the applicant is also seeking a waiver from this item.
Yes, so this waiver is the actually existing driveway and parking spaces are in the front yard setback. If you look up and down Route 9, any of the structures that face the highway have the same similar condition. So we're asking for the waiver to allow the existing parking to remain in the front yard setback.
Number 6, as per Borough Ordinance requirements, a minimum of 1 off-street loading berth is required per building, and this applicant is also requesting a waiver from this item.
Yes, so the reason for this waiver is we don't need a loading berth for such a small use, so the applicant is seeking a waiver from providing a loading berth.
Number 7, the proposed parking lot area is not set back 5 feet from the property line as per ordinance requirements.
Yeah, so the existing driveway has a 3-foot side yard setback that's an existing condition. Again, we're seeking that waiver to allow that existing condition to remain.
Mr. Chairman, I have finished my direct examination of Mr. French. Does the board require anything further from him, or may I proceed with my next witness?
Any other questions for Mr. French?
One question. Mr. French, do you happen to know the height of the accessory garage, just so we have it for the record?
I know it's a 1-story structure. I don't know the exact height, but I'd say it's less than 20 feet.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Got a question for our engineer. Jay, does impervious coverage make a difference between a gravel driveway and a paved driveway?
It does, yes. You'd have greater impervious coverage if you paved the driveway, but this is an existing condition. It's been there. It's more of a residential character, not really a commercial parking area, so it's really a preference of the board. Usually, if you have a lot of customers in and out, you have a lot of public traffic, you'd want to make sure driveway's paved. Here, it's a little different. You just have employees on a regular basis in and out. But again, it's really up to the board.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Go with your next witness.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Allison Coffin, can you share your educational and professional qualifications with the board?
Swear in first. Ms. Kaufman, you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please give us your name, spell your last name.
Allison Coffin, Coffin.
Thank you. Please continue.
I have a bachelor's degree from Boston College. I'm a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey. I'm also certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners. I've had my license and certification for almost 16 years now. In that time, I've been accepted as an expert in front of more than 80 communities. I've been
I
here
make
many
a
times.
motion that we accept your credentials. You've been here before.
Yes.
Proceed.
Thank you.
Ms. Coffin, what did you do to be prepared to testify here today?
I met with the applicant. I looked at the application and the applicant's materials. I read the professionals' reports. I visited the site. I looked at the zoning ordinance and the master plan.
And as you are aware, this use variance application requires specific proofs for the applicant to be justified in receiving the board's approval. In a narrative fashion, can you present those proofs to the board?
Sure. What we have tonight is a property that's 6,939 square feet. It's located at 879 Upper Main Street, which is Route 9. It's a divided highway at this point. The site was developed with a single-family dwelling, a detached garage, a shed, and a driveway, and the applicant is proposing to use this building as an office space for a general contractor's business that is of a very small intensity with 3 employees only and no customers visiting the site. The house itself will be used for office space with the basement used for storage. The garage is also going to be used for storage, and the shed will be used for maintenance equipment for the maintenance of this property. The applicant proposes no changes to the existing building. There's no signage proposed. and no lighting proposed that would indicate that this is anything other than a single-family dwelling, if you didn't already know it was an office. The lot is zoned R10 residential. The proposed office is not a permitted use in the zone, so we're requesting a D1 variance for a use that's not permitted. There are a couple existing bulk variance conditions on the site which are not being changed. Those include lot area, lot depth, the front yard setback, the rear yard setback, impervious coverage, and accessory side and rear yard setbacks. But these are existing conditions which are not in any way altered, since we're not doing any physical alteration to the property. There's parking relief that is required for this use. An office of this size would require 6 parking spaces. There are 4 that exist on the site, and they are adequate to support an office with 3 employees. And there's a buffer ordinance that requires a 50-foot wide buffer between residential and commercial uses, and none has been provided. It's not possible to provide a full 50 feet given the existing setbacks of the structure, but also providing a 50-foot fully landscaped buffer would change the visual character of the structure. Right now, it blends in perfectly with the residential neighborhood as it appears residential. Adding a large buffer would change that, drawing attention to the office use. It's my opinion that special reasons exist for the granting of the requested variances, and the variances can be granted without detriment to the health, safety, and general welfare. Special reasons exist for the granting of the requested variance in that this site is particularly suited to the proposed use. The property is an undersized lot. It has frontage on a divided state highway. It's located near the boundary between 2 municipalities in an area with a mix of residential and office uses fronting on a highway at a location that's between the Garden State Parkway and Route 35. When I went to visit the site, there was significant truck traffic on the highway in this location that backs up as it approaches Route 35. So this is not an ideal location for a single-family dwelling. The site has an existing building, which can be readily adapted to support the contractor's office use as it's proposed, without any external or internal alterations that changes the character of the appearance of this site from residential. So the office of this type, occupying a residential structure, is a typical adaptive reuse for structures, residences on state highways such as this one. The bulk variances that are being requested can be granted without detriment. Many of the bulk variances are pre-existing non-conforming conditions, so they're hardship C1 variances, which are not altered by the proposed use, and that's the lot area, the lot depth, the front and rear yard setback, the impervious coverage, and the accessory setbacks. The parking variance is new, but that can be granted without detriment. Though the parking supply does not meet the ordinance requirement, it is sufficient for the office use as it is proposed. Furthermore, providing additional parking at this time to meet the ordinance requirements would exceed what the office needs, but would also draw attention to the office by providing a much larger parking field than is typical for residences in this area. The buffer variance, likewise, is a bit of a hardship in that there's not enough land surrounding the home to provide a 50-foot buffer, but also providing it would create a harm to the detrimental harm to the residential character of the area by drawing attention to this use. The proposed variances would not substantially impair the intent and purpose of your master plan and zoning ordinance. The master plan does have a goal of encouraging the maintenance of existing buildings, a business community, and providing for a desirable new commercial development. And this goal beneath it has an objective to continue and encourage the promote economic reuse of existing structures. And this is exactly what this application achieves.
And with that, I conclude my direct examination of Ms. Coffin. Does the board have anything for Ms. Coffin?
Anyone from the board wish? Okay, no questions.
And with that, our application is complete.
Okay. I open this application to the public. Anyone from the public wish to speak in regards to this application on Upper Main Street?
Move that the public portion be closed. Second.
Public portion is closed. You wish to give a summation?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just that this use variance is particularly suited for the site, and since it's been operating as Mr. Zavaru described, with, fitting into the character of the Route 9 corridor. I think that it's suitable for use variance.
Thank you. What's the pleasure of the board concerning this application?
Mr. Chairman, could we just review, like the hours of operations? Maybe the attorney can give us hours of operation, days of operation, number of employees, things like that, so that we have that all in order.
I can do that. Yeah.
Well, we can work together, it's fine.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Mancini, there's going to be 3 employees. They don't work on Saturdays and Sundays, and I believe the hours are from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m.?
Yes.
No contractors visiting.
Oh, those type of things, yeah, sure. So there would be no contractors, there would be no storage of construction or contractor type equipment. It's really to be, as the owner indicated, we operate as the office. The field folks are out in the field and the managers are out in the field. This is really to take care of what we would commonly call paperwork.
And that the type of business would just be this office-type business with very limited employees?
Would be limited to the contractor's office use with those description as I usually do in the resolution described, as we just did.
So I'm just,
No sign.
so if a dentist wanted to come in or something, they'd
It would
have
be,
to come
it's
back?
limited to a contractor's office because it's a use variance.
I have a question on that point. So there's no way to limit it in a broader sense? Or we're gonna say, he converted this, we'll give him if we give him the use variance, then the only thing that he can sell it to is another contractor. He's gotta find a contractor to buy it,
Well,
open up office space.
if he's lucky enough to find another contractor who wants to purchase it, it would be allowable to continue under the variance
Right.
if the board grants it. Additionally, he's agreed to give up any residential use while he has, using it as a contractor's office, but I will word the resolution if the board so approves that it doesn't preclude that. So if he was to sell it, and let's say somebody wanted to use it as a house and the zoning stays as is, and you could use it as a single-family home, it could be used as that. But any other use would need to come back to the board.
Okay.
And again, we wouldn't want to make it too broad because the specifics of the application, the size of it, the driveway, for example, it works for this applicant. Number of employees it has, some general office use may have frequent visitors, a doctor, dentist, or anything else may need more spaces. So that's why we want to limit it, as we've discussed, to allow this applicant to operate freely, but not to allow it much further use than that.
So, Mr. Chairman, with those stipulations, I move that the application be granted.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve this application. Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. Civilli? Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Hey, Council, the application's been approved. At next month's meeting, it will be memorialized, and at that time, you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, everyone else.
Okay, our next application is case 1901 BKD LLC, 1979 Highway Route 35.
Am I working? This mic or this mic? This mic. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, board's professionals and public, good evening all. Kenneth Pape on behalf of the applicant BKD LLC. Before we begin with the substantive presentation, may I ask that the notices have been received and the board has established jurisdiction.
Yes, Mr. Pape, Chairman, board members reviewed the notice provided by the applicant. It complies in all respects with the requirements of the municipal land use law and the borough's ordinance, vesting the board with jurisdiction to hear the application. Please continue, Mr. Pape. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is a request to convert a property that has for decades, if not generations, been a nightclub on Route 35. Your applicants who are here this evening acquired the property in 1997. At that time, it had been a nightclub for many years. It was known in the 90s and earlier as the Crocodile Cafe, for those whose memories go back that far. And after the Rexinis family purchased it in 1997, shortly thereafter they converted it to a Latin nightclub that was known as Club Paradise. And they operated Club Paradise for a number of years. And in the year 2000, they converted it to what I think would be best described as either a New York City or a Miami-style lounge that was known as the Deco Lounge. And the Deco Lounge operated at the property until somewhere around 2013, at which time it was the business was sold and it became known as Icon, and it too was a nightclub. So this is a property that has been a nightclub for a long time. And our clients have essentially made a business decision to not be in the nightclub business. Across the street, there was Club Abyss, and that was theirs, and they sold it. And it became a pure, I think, a teenage-oriented type club. But they sold that. And they're now looking to bring this one to its conclusion. And what we're asking the board is to permit the reuse or repurposing of this property as 44 for-sale townhomes. You'll hear from the applicant's professionals that the 44 townhomes fits nicely on the property, that there's a wide roadway, there's more than ample parking, there's parking that exceeds the requirements of the borough as well as RSIS, and there's all of the proposed townhouses are 2-bedroom. The presentation will be made to the board through 4 professional witnesses. Peter Strong of Crest Engineering will present the use variance sketch. It's a bifurcated application, which means that we have not engineered the site plan. The sketch is demonstrative of the development plans, but it's not fully engineered. I'll ask Mr. Strong to share with you his professional opinion that the property can be fully engineered, and if this board grants the use variance relief, we'll come back with a fully engineered site plan. You'll also hear from John Ray. John Ray is the principal of McDonough and Ray. He is a traffic expert. We've asked that he work with us on determining the appropriate location for the entrance onto Route 35 and its design, and he'll also go through the interior roadway and parking adequacy. We have a wonderful architect, Shang-Yi Rumler. Shang-Yi Rumler is a principal of Minnow and Wasco. Minnow and Wasco is one of the premier architectural firms. I know that they have come to this town previously. I've had the privilege of working with them. The Rexinis chose them because the quality of their work is a superior product. I think the one local facility that is generally known as a whole waterfront in Long Branch, that's Minnow and Wasco. Okay. But that's just a local one. It goes on and on. So Shang-Yi is going to present the proposed architectural treatments. There's 2 different types of buildings that are proposed. This property has some interesting topography, and choosing 2 different types of buildings to work into the topography became a key part of what Mrs. Rumler brought to the table. And last, we have Allison Coffin gets to do 2 tonight. Allison is our professional planner, and she has been working with us, and she'll provide all the outline and the proofs that are required for the board to consider the use variance relief. With that as the opening statement, and with permission, Mr. Chair, I'll go right to Mr. Strong, ask that he be sworn, and share his credentials and his exhibits with you.
Yes, proceed.
Acceptable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening, Mr. Strong. You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please give us your name, spell your last name for the record.
Peter W. Strong, S-T-R-O-N-G, with Crest Engineering at 100 Reich Drive, Millstone, New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Pape.
Mr. Strong, would you take a few moments to share with all of us your professional and your education background?
Yes, I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering degree from Newark College of Engineering in 1971. Became a licensed professional engineer in 1975. I'm also licensed in the state of Florida. I also have a professional planner's license. I started the Crest Engineering business in 1981.
I make a motion that your credentials be accepted.
And I've testified here before.
Yes, you have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Strong's testimony this evening will be as a professional engineer, notwithstanding his dual licenses. Mr. Strong, I'm going to ask if you would identify the exhibits that you prepared for this evening. Let's have the 3 exhibits marked and labeled. Are we beginning with A1?
Yes.
Well,
And
let's-
again, Mr. Pape, as usual, if it's something new or been colorized, we mark it. If it's a plan sheet that's already been submitted, just give us the title block so we can follow along.
Sure. I think we're going to mark all of them.
Certainly.
So A1, Mr. Strong, the title block would,
A1 is use variance aerial display using New Jersey ortho imagery from 2015.
and is that white line around it a 500-foot line? Thank you.
Do we mark them all?
Yep, let's do A2.
Testify as I go.
No, A2. Thanks.
A2 is an enlarged aerial display with the proposed layout for the townhouses superimposed on top of the aerial image.
And A3.
A3 A3 is a colored rendering of the, an enlarged colored rendering of the site layout portion of the property.
If we can return to A1, I'll ask if you use that to verbally take the board to the site and, oh, thank you. Mr. Strong reminds me that we have colored versions. For, are they as packets of 3? Peter?
No, they're one individual, 3 individual ones.
Okay. So as you begin, I'll do the handing out. If you could just take us through the, would you, John, thank you. If you could take us through the exhibits. A1, the property with a 500-foot radius around it. Just give us an idea of where it is on the highway and what we're near.
Sure. The property that we're interested in this evening is known as lots 1.01 and 2.01 in block 426. It's outlined in yellow on the display map. It is situated along the westerly side of Route 35. The Garden State Parkway is just to the south. Ernston Road is actually to the west. Ernston Road is farther to the south, and Fairview Avenue is just to the north. There's a 500-foot radius showing the properties in the surrounding vicinity. Most of the properties along Route 35 are businesses, but there are residents in the vicinity of this site as well.
And if the, on Route 35 on our side as you head, I'm going to say, I guess it's further east or south, what's are the closest businesses to the site? Do you identify the?
There's auto body repair shops, mechanical repair shops, businesses doing auto repairs and that sort of thing, for the most part. There's also across the street some restaurants and nightclubs that are in that vicinity, and a variety of other commercial uses, contractors' offices and that sort of thing on the north side.
Thank you. If we could, A2, let's zoom in a little bit. Same yellow outline around the perimeter of the property?
That's correct.
And we're just a lot closer.
Right. This shows the proposed entranceway off of Route 35 into the site with a looping roadway down to a cul-de-sac, all meeting the RSIS standards, and then townhouses of different types along both sides of that proposed roadway. together with off-street parking that is scattered throughout the site. You can see that much of the site is wooded, but there are areas in the upper portion where the existing nightclub is located, which is surrounded by a parking lot, and then there is an existing driveway that runs down to the lower portion of the site, which is another parking area that is mostly compacted gravel. It's been in that location for a long time. There's Crossways, a brook crosses the site along the southern, southwesterly boundary, let's call it. The area it's on the north side, north end of the property where the existing building is, and the parking lot is pretty much even with the Highway 35, but there's a drastic drop-off to the lower portion of the site where the cul-de-sac is proposed is about 35 feet lower than the existing highway at this point.
Could you share with us the depth of that property? Just how deep does the property travel?
It's about 450 feet frontage. It's about 400 feet along the northerly edge, and it's about 850 feet along the southerly edge.
So the total property's depth is 850 feet from the
Yes. It consists of 8.29 acres.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is not a presentation of a site plan, but I believe it's important to go through what I'm going to call the statutory site plan elements, really to demonstrate that this property can be engineered as a site plan, which ultimately would come before the board if the board found the use variance appropriate. I'm going to ask if we could just go through those site plan elements. And let's start with grading. And, if you could just generally describe the topography of the property and just in simple terms, how the property would be graded to accommodate the residential use.
Well, as I indicated, the upper portion currently with the existing lounge is pretty much even with the Highway 35, with a slight slope towards the west, and then there's a steep driveway that goes down to a level, more or less level parking area that's consisting of gravel at the current time. So we're going to be pretty much maintaining those grades coming through the first group of townhouses on the upper portion, then down to the lower area where the cul-de-sac is. We would be maintaining the grades on the existing site.
And from a drainage perspective, a stormwater management, you pointed out that we have Crossways Brook at the back. I think it's also important to point out that there's substantial delineated wetlands at the rear. And then if you just give a sense of the tools that are available to you for stormwater management.
Yeah, we have delineated the wetlands on the site, which is pretty much all the area back by Crossways Brook, even extending up to the northwesterly portion of the site, and back down around again to the southeasterly portion of the site, designated a 50-foot buffer by the DEP, and we have fit the proposed layout into the restrictions of the wetlands and buffers. There's a little bit of buffer averaging that needs to go on, but it's well within the limits that the DEP allows. As I pointed out before, the upper portion is pretty much all asphalt and building, and then the lower portion is compacted gravel, and it's pretty much impervious at this point in time. So the stormwater management really consists of, by developing the site as we proposed it, we're actually increasing the green space on the property and reducing the runoff that currently exists to less than that in the developed condition.
So 3 things I'd like to make certain the board is aware of. Your professional opinion, can you design a stormwater management system on this property that fully complies with the borough stormwater requirements and the DEP stormwater requirements?
Yes.
And want to make this point, Mr. Chair, members of the board, the entire stormwater management system would be a privately owned system owned by the association, and would create no burden of maintenance responsibility on the borough. Peter, circulation, I think the driveway system, I mean, the entrance roadway and the driveway system is somewhat self-evident, just from looking at it. But in my opening remarks, I pointed out that the road design was a 28-foot wide road design. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's the RSIS standards for this type of development, yes.
And there was also during review with the professionals, there was some guidance, some comments about the radius of the curve being redesigned to accommodate all of the anticipated vehicles, emergency vehicles, fire vehicles. Have you accomplished that?
Yeah, we've actually, this is probably the third layout that we've had on this site, all similar but slightly different based on input that we've gotten from various sources. And we have reduced or increased, I guess, the radiuses of the proposed roadway to meet the traffic control standards that are required. And we have shown as part of the packet of information that we submitted how a fire truck could maneuver through this site so that there's no problem with circulation as far as that goes.
So, and I think, again, not an engineered site plan, but I think it's important to make the representation to the board. Your professional opinion, you can, and if given the opportunity, will design this road system to be consistent with the borough's requirements and RSIS's requirements.
That's correct.
Parking required, Mr. Ray will talk a little bit more about parking, but we've got townhouses with garages and driveways. We have a 28-foot wide roadway that could legally have parking along the roadway, and we have parking lots. Could you just do a quantification? How much parking do we have on site?
Well, we have 44 two-bedroom townhouse units, which under the RSIS standards would require 101 parking spaces, including the garage spaces and the driveway spaces. On this site, we have 110 parking spaces at the current time, including the required number of handicap spaces, 22 of which are either perpendicular spaces along the roadway or parallel spaces along the roadway to meet that requirement.
Okay. Another statutory element of a site plan is a lighting plan. No lighting has been designed. Know that we have discussed at length the type of lighting, and if you could make the representation, we're looking to do the modern LED.
Yeah, we're anticipating that we would be utilizing LED type structures, downward facing, and that would provide the lighting that's required both by RSIS and the borough standards.
And fully shielded and house side back shields.
Yes.
And low poles, so that all of those elements are available as your tools, and all of those would be part of the final lighting
Correct.
design.
Yes.
Landscaping is an element. You've indicated that we're going greener than it is currently. You've indicated considerable woodlands that are in the wetland areas and buffers. All those areas would remain undisturbed and under a conservation easement?
The wetland areas and buffers would remain in conservation easements and including the buffers. And then the areas in between and around the townhouses that are currently asphalt and or compacted gravel would be taken up and repurposed as landscaping areas, planted topsoil and seeded, whatever.
Mr. Chair, although there is no landscaping plan as part of the use variance presentation, with the permission of the rec syndices, I can make the commitment. We're looking forward to working with the borough for a full landscape plan, one that would enhance the viewscape from the roadway and would also benefit the homeowners individually. Lastly, signage. No signage is proposed yet, but we're proposing that there be an entrance sign. Just
I would anticipate, yes, that we would provide an entrance sign on either side of, not both sides, but either side of the driveway, whichever is turns out to be most advantageous to direct traffic and identify the site to the public so that there's safe entry and exit conditions.
most of the time when we're presenting a site plan, I've got Peter going into great detail, going through line by line Mr. Cornell's report. This is my direct presentation of Mr. Strong, primarily because it is a demonstration that the site can be fully engineered. I have no further questions of Mr. Strong. He is available to you as the board or to your professionals.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have
Go.
why did you decide to make it one way and not kind of a horseshoe and exit to the south?
Sure.
This configuration?
Yeah.
Because the highway is about 35 feet higher than the cul-de-sac area. I tried my best to get another entranceway to, or exit or entrance to come out in that location, but I couldn't do it and meet any of the anticipated slope requirements for a driveway that would be coming in off the highway, so.
Can't do it with fill?
Just not possible.
Can't do it with fill?
Well, you could fill it, but you'd end up having to fill so far back up in here that it wouldn't make any sense. The area that's down over here is even lower, so trying to get up from the townhouses to the roadway after you filled it wouldn't
It's
work.
like a cliff effect.
Yeah, pretty much.
It is a cliff.
And then one other question. I was looking at this and where the S's are in the crossway, is there something there, that little spot? Is there a little?
In here?
Yeah, right there. I guess you didn't look into that.
I don't know what that is. It's not clear enough on the photo to identify anything particular, but there's one tree that looks a little greener and there's some white something or other.
It
I
just
don't know
looked
what
like
that
there
is.
was some pad or building or something there, but you don't know.
I don't think so, but I don't know what that is.
I wonder if you could explain a little bit more about your plans for drainage and stormwater. What's that going to entail, since it's so low over there? Is that going to be a pumping system of some sort, or?
For stormwater, no.
Drain off somewhere?
No. What the idea is that right now, because there's so much impervious area on the site, that there's a certain amount of runoff to the brook at this time. Because we are taking that impervious area, buildings and asphalt and compacted gravel out, and the areas that we're replacing it with for the townhouses and the driveway are significantly less than what's already there. The new spaces that are going to be in between the buildings and around the buildings is going to become green space. So it will be less runoff in the developed condition than our developed condition than is currently there in the existing condition.
But all gravity flow to the rear?
Oh, yeah, everything flows down the hill, and there are some storm drains that are in the parking lot in the lower section where the gravel parking is that discharge out to the creek. So we would be utilizing that existing underground system to collect and put the drainage from our new roadway into that and continue where it goes in the current.
Peter, even though the
condition.
volume's going down, you still have
The volume and the rate of runoff is both going to go down, yes.
But you still have an obligation to design a stormwater system that cleans that water and controls the rate
Yes,
that the water is
yes.
moving downhill.
Right. If we need to, we'll be putting in stormwater filters to clean it up before it goes into the creek. And if necessary, we will also provide means to recharge the groundwater as is part of the normal stormwater management system. So we can do that.
Mr. Chairman, is there affordable housing involved with this type of quantity of housing? Is there an obligation?
If may I address it, or with permission? So, Mr. Foley, when this application first was developed a few years ago, the Borough of Sayreville was actively engaged in settling its affordable housing obligation. And we actually submitted this as a property for consideration, adding in an additional 12 affordable apartments. We were not selected by that. The plan that we present to you does not have inclusionary affordable units. You have that plan, the borough has that plan in place. What we would offer is we would be participating through the affordable housing or your ordinance that requires cash contributions being made for each new unit constructed. So there's no inclusionary, just the cash contribution.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Any other questions?
If I may, Mr. Pape, you indicated the applicant would be maintaining a privately owned stormwater management system. Has the applicant given any thought as to whether the roadway would be a private road or a public road?
Plenty of thought, it's a private road.
Private.
It's intended to be it's a private community.
Under the auspices of the homeowners association?
Homeowners Association would own the roadway and the stormwater system and be solely responsible for its maintenance.
Thank you for clarifying.
44 units is a dense enough community to handle that type of obligation.
Excuse me. Two quick questions. Is there any thought, is there a requirement for a dumpster location, or is it anticipated that trash pickup will be at each unit individually?
It's curb.
Okay.
Yeah, curb.
And I know
Cans at the curb.
there's nothing shown on the plans at this time. Is there any thought to any kind of amenity space, common area, that clubhouse, that kind of thing for the development?
The answer is yes, but we would prefer, and I hope that this comes out the right way, we would prefer the guidance that would come from your offices as we worked out on a site plan to determine what the appropriate amenities are. It's anticipated, as you'll hear from other witnesses, 2-bedroom units they're not children unfriendly, but these are millennials and people my age. This is the shoulders of the community who would be looking to live. So picking the right recreation is something I'd like to talk to you about and work with the board. Don't see it as being a major part of the project, but I definitely see a clubhouse and some amenities being beneficial. But
thanks.
This will be strictly 2 bedrooms.
Strictly 2 bedrooms. It was originally designed with 3-bedroom units, and those have been eliminated. It is 100% 2 bedrooms.
And you would accept that as a condition of approval?
We do. We do. Yes.
Is this a gated community?
I don't see it being gated.
Okay, I just want to get it on the record.
Yeah, I don't see it being gated. I mean, I think that the safe ingress and egress from Highway 35 should be the paramount design concern, and having a gate there, that's not the best.
I had read something in our paperwork that there were suggestions about snaking that over to the actual intersection there. No way to do that because the cliff comes on you?
Yeah, it's very, very steep even in this location here, and our discussions with our traffic engineer indicated that this is probably the better location to bring it out actually as far this way to the north as possible. That kind of encompasses where the existing curb cuts are from the lounge, but it even pushes them farther north for the most part, so that we get as much separation from you can see the stop line for the traffic light, so we get as much space in between there as we can.
Mm-hmm. Currently, there's 2 driveways, separate ingress and egress. Mr. Ray will discuss with the board. The DOT's preference is to redesign those as a single ingress and egress driveway, and that's part of what was done.
Can you mention the visibility of these units from the highway and from surrounding neighborhoods? Like, I guess what I'm going for is, will the ones in the back really be visible from Highway 35 because it's so low? Can you just kind of touch that topic?
Ms. Rumler is prepared to, but I can tell you, as we prepared, we realized that from the highway, you might see the peaks of the buildings. I mean, as Peter indicated, at the cul-de-sac, it's 35 feet below the road, and then it's going down. And
What about the other ones?
the ones that are on the higher end will be visible as residential structures. We'll present those to you in just a moment.
Any other questions?
If I may, Mr. Cornell had raised in his report, asked us that we revisit the on-site parking. 5 of the parking stalls are shown as parallel parking. I asked Peter if there was a way that we could maybe enhance that parking. Although it's a 28-foot wide roadway, which by RSIS standards fully allows parking on one side, Peter came up with a scheme I think it goes on the next exhibit, Pete. It goes on your
Yeah.
next sheet. Peter came up with a scheme of from a distance of 100 feet or so, bumping the road out. How far did it work out, Pete?
Well, what I've shown here is to bump it out by 7 feet, which I think we can probably do.
This is a patented technique of Mr. Strong to have a color form available to solve problems brought to his attention days before a public hearing. Nice.
So, yeah, we're previously, if you noted, or if you look at your displays that you have of yourself, we had a 7-foot strip for the parking area for those 5 spaces. The cartway is 28 feet wide. It's the 7-foot parking lane, left 21 feet for the travel lanes, which is acceptable and per the RSIS standards. But I think we can move the parallel parking to the west, and I think we can do it as much as 7 feet, which would take the whole parking lane off of the driveway and leave an unobstructed 28-foot wide roadway for passing traffic. And it also continues to maintain the parking in a kind of a centralized location where it's accessible to more of the units rather than shifting them to some other location where they would be offset and not as readily accessible to all the units.
So that amendment, if found to be acceptable by your professionals in the board, is part of the offer of your applicant.
Why don't we just mark that inset as A4?
I'm sorry?
A4.
We'll just
the
mark,
insert.
mark the inset.
Yes,
You can put it on the back of it if it's easier for you, Peter, just so we have a clean record. Thank you.
And that concludes our presentation of Mr. Strong. And unless there's further questions, Mr. Chairman, we are prepared to move to John Ray, the traffic engineer. Acceptable? Thank you.
Just one quick,
Oh, sorry.
that's sidewalks all around, right?
Whole side.
Yes.
100%.
Sidewalks, both sides.
100%. Thank you, Mr. Ray. Thank you, Mr. Strong. Mr. Ray, if we could have...
You, Mr. Ray, you swear firm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please give us your name, spell your last name for the
My
record.
name is John Ray. Last name is spelled R-E-A.
Thank you. Please continue.
And Mr. Ray, take a few moments to share your professional educational background with all.
I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. I have a total of 45 years' experience in the traffic engineering field. That is my field of specialty. I have an undergraduate degree in civil engineering from NJIT, master's degree in transportation engineering from NYU, and I've appeared before many planning and zoning boards, including this board before.
Make a motion to accept his credentials. Proceed.
Thank
you. Mr. Ray, we've asked from day one as we worked on this project, I think everyone should know, we've had Mr. Ray at our side, providing us with guidance throughout the design. The topography of the site appeared to the Rexinuses to warrant having traffic expertise available from day one. I'm going to ask if you could begin at the entrance driveway. You've heard from the board expressing concerns about the choice of location and choice of design. I'm going to ask if you could just briefly describe the design, whether it's consistent with DOT requirements, and then the safety of that design.
The location and the design of the right-in, right-out driveway that Mr. Strong has shown on his plan is in the optimum location, in my opinion, for safe and efficient ingress and egress. The design that's been laid out on the use variance plan is designed in accordance with NJDOT design criteria, and it is something that I believe is approvable from the NJDOT. I would also point out that the current condition, we have 2 driveways, as has been indicated before. They are on either side of the 5,000 square foot nightclub building. So there are actually 2 connections to Route 35 from the property today. We will be replacing that with 1 NJDOT conforming right-in, right-out driveway at the northern edge of the property.
And horizontal and vertical conditions, are you able to achieve adequate sight distance? It's a state highway.
Yes, we are. adequate site distance can be provided for at that location.
And you're comfortable that the conditions that exist will accommodate that?
I am.
On-site circulation, my comments about the driveway, my opening remarks, and Peter developed that, and now Peter's enhanced the on-site circulation with his insert design. I'm just going to ask if you could comment on the adequacy of a 28-foot wide roadway. Does it, in fact, as a traffic expert, handle all the anticipated vehicle movements?
It does, and in fact, should the board like this plan and like the 28-foot cartway, we would actually need an agreement to exceed. The RSIS only requires a 24-foot wide roadway. We've provided a 28-foot wide roadway. We think it's a superior design, and we would need an agreement to exceed the RSIS should the board agree that a 28-foot cartway is appropriate. 101 parking spaces are required as per the RSIS. 110 are provided, including 22 spaces, as Mr. Strong indicated, either in parallel spaces on the street or in areas off the street that would be 90 degrees to the 28-foot cartway. So we have, it's an RSIS compliant plan.
Share with us an opinion. You've worked on a number of these facilities, and nothing can make one of these facilities less attractive than inadequate parking. In your professional opinion, has the applicant included adequate parking to handle the anticipated parking demands of the residents and their guests?
Yes, I believe that is the case. We have 9 more spaces than the RSIS requires, and I do believe it will be more than adequate to serve the community.
Okay. Because, again, we're at the use variance stage and the full design would follow its site plan, these were the questions I had of Mr. Ray. I wanted the board to hear that the design of the entrance roadway was proper and safe, that the roadway system was designed to be consistent with all requirements and would be safe, and that we exceeded the parking that is required. There would certainly be a full-blown traffic study and further report at the time of a site plan. I have nothing further, Mr. Ray.
I'd like to add one more thing, that a traffic generation comparison, one of the things I did do, because this is a use variance application, I did traffic generation, I did a comparison between the 44 townhomes and the existing 5,000 square foot nightclub, and the proposal that's in front of the board will generate approximately half of the peak hour traffic that the nightclub previously generated.
Thank you.
Which I think is important in consideration of a use variance.
Thank you. I have experts that come up with their own questions.
During morning
Very
peak.
much appreciated.
Any
I have
questions?
nothing further of Mr. Ray.
Any questions of this witness?
So I have a couple. What's your opinion about like a deceleration and an acceleration lane at the entrance, giving a little bit more?
That would be subject to the NJDOT. It has been my experience on highways such as Route 35 that have shoulders. Typically, the shoulders are used, I wouldn't say as a de facto deceleration lane, but that typically is what is used for all the adjoining properties, the commercial properties up and down the highway. I really didn't see any other land uses in the area that had formal decel lanes. They used the shoulder. And that's typical of a state highway like Route 35. But again, we're subject to the DOT.
We can go one step further. We've, in this town and other towns where CME is the consulting engineer, when we go to the DOT, we can notify your consulting engineer and invite participation of your consulting engineer in our application to bring that concern to their attention. Can't guarantee what the DOT will do, but we'll certainly make an opportunity for your engineer to be heard at those meetings. We have no problem making that commitment.
And one other question is, there's a couple places between the townhouses and on the circle where people might choose to park. Are you going to have no parking signs, or how's that going to be controlled?
Actually, that is something to discuss with the board. There are a couple of places. Here's one right here, and there might be another one in here. The road is 28 foot wide, and it is permitted to park on one side of the street. We could permit the parking to occur on one side of the street, or we could post no parking signs if that was the desire of the board. I don't think we need that on-street parking. We have enough parking, we exceed the RSIS. So if it was the board's desire to have that parking formally restricted, we would agree to do that.
And then how would that be enforced? It would just be signs
And we'd have to give the borough's police Title 39 powers to enforce the parking restrictions.
We would most certainly file a Title 39 request to make certain that your police, the borough police, can enforce all traffic on the roadway. Privately owned, but we would want Title 39 to be enforced. Speed limit, stop signs, all.
I'd leave that to the professionals to handle.
Okay, got it. Got it.
Any other questions? Proceed with your
Thank
next.
you.
Thank you.
Shangi Rumler is an architect with Minnow and Wasco, as I indicated earlier, a firm with just a stellar reputation. We've had the privilege of working with Mrs. Rumler on a number of buildings. Recently, working in the city of South Amboy, designing a number of buildings. I've worked with her throughout the state. We'll share with you her credentials and then present to you the architectural elements. They're intended to be conceptual, to be developed with the board and the board's professionals. They're intended to be a very high-end product. Mrs. Rumler, if you would share with the board
Before you get
your
going, sorry.
name?
People are moving this way, maybe you can just,
No, it's okay, I'm sorry.
no.
Just direct neighbors, so that's my.
Yeah, can you?
No problem at all, sir. It just,
Just tilt them so that,
sometimes they set the boards up for the board to see and don't realize some members of the public might want to see. So give them a moment, they'll turn around for you. It's not a problem at all.
Parting gifts for all the contestants.
Oh, there we go. Thanks, Don Pardo.
Mrs. Rumler,
We'll swear in.
we'll swear you in.
Ms. Rumler, you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And please give us your name, spell your last name.
Shangyi Rumler, S-A-N-G dash Y-E-E, Rumler, R-U-M-M-L-E-R.
Thank you, please continue.
Mrs. Rumler, share with all of us your professional and educational background.
I graduated from University of Pennsylvania in 1988 and have been practicing since then, 31 years.
And licensed to practice as an architect in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, I'm licensed architect in the state of New Jersey.
And the plans that you're presenting to the board are plans that you have developed for the site?
That's correct. We developed.
I'm going to ask if you could just introduce, early on I indicated the topography required that we have some flexibility in the building design, and you've offered two different types of buildings. I'm going to ask if you could describe those buildings and how they could be accommodated on this property. And a brief description of the architectural elements, types of materials, and the level that we're trying to achieve.
Okay. Yeah, as Mr. Kim Pape pointed out, we have two housing types, and they're developed to fit this specific lot. The constraints such as topography, especially geometry. It's not a square lot. It has a different angle and has different topography. Therefore, we developed some of the product longer or shorter to fit the site specific. And each unit has 2 bedrooms, and they have their own private garage, and will have a designated surface parking space directly behind their garage doors.
And if you could just give us an idea of the materials that you're proposing to use in the facades of these buildings.
Okay. In front of us are 2 enlarged versions of the plan we submitted earlier this month. They're just in color and enlarged version.
So why don't we, since they've been colorized, could we mark those as A5 and A6?
Terrific.
If you would, thank you.
Sure.
And Also, taking a break, the board accepts her qualifications and as an
Oh, I
architect.
left that out, didn't I?
That's all right.
It's okay.
We'll retroactively apply it to her testimony she's given so far. Please continue.
Thanks for pointing that out. So, Mrs. Rumler, if you could just take us through the facade treatments and the materials that you propose for these units.
Okay. As I indicated earlier, these are enlarged version of the plans we submitted this year. To the left there is a straight up traditional townhouse product, and to the right is the stacked townhouse product. And both housing product, we are envisioned to design them with high quality living and high-end architectural appearances. And if we take this townhouse, straight-up townhouse elevation as an example, we will be introducing a series of well-proportioned turn gables and dormers to break the straight eave lines, and we will be introducing double-hung windows. Sometimes they are paired together, sometimes they're single, and flanking with shutters. And on top of that, we will have different metal pane roofs, decorated columns, and especially there's some box bay window. And these nice enriched architectural elements will be accents throughout the building facade. And as to the exterior finish, we will be introducing high-end superior materials such as stone or brick base, and with fiber cement sidings, panels, or trims throughout the building middle portion. And of course, to the roof, we definitely use a quality shingle.
And all of the architectural elements, are residential architectural treatments.
They are.
And if you could very simply describe, we're not architects, the difference between a side-by-side traditional townhome and the stacked townhouse product.
Yeah, well, traditional townhouse is easy to understand. It's a party wall, and you go in, and the 3 levels of living belong to one homeowner. When it's a stacked, can I use a floor plan?
Sure.
This one. So we put a little bit color on the plan to easy for visualization.
A7, if you would. Thank you.
A7.
So again, to the left is a traditional straight-up townhouse. You enter garage with a stair, go up to living dining level, and there's a bedroom level. As to the stacked townhouse, they we color code them. So for the lower unit, you enter through the garage or a front door through this corner. So the garage will go through the laundry room, a mud room, and through the living, dining, and kitchen level, with the interior private stair takes you up to the second floor with a 2-bedroom. And the other townhouses sort of overlapping a little bit. It will be entering through a private entrance with a switchback stair, and again has its own private garage entering its own lobby. This is all privately without any interaction with your neighbor. So after you enter your own lobby, go up to the switchback stair, you will arrive to your kitchen, living, and dining level. And by taking the same switchback stair will take you to the 3rd level where the 2 bedrooms will be located.
And this product would give flexibility to Peter in his design, working with the topography of the site.
That's correct, because our site has a longer distance, shorter distance, along with slope of topography. So we need to use a little bit different product in order to fit the site better.
And although your description is clear. It's more, to those of us who are not architects, it's a little hard to follow. I'm going to ask you to share with the board, both of these products are products that you're actively designing throughout the state of New Jersey and are currently being built everywhere.
They are.
Okay. I have nothing further of Mrs. Rumler. The purpose of Mrs. Rumler's testimony was to make clear the goal of your applicant to bring in I'm going to call it a superior architectural firm, and to make a commitment to a high-quality product. What we show are conceptual. We recognize, again, if we proceed to a site plan, the full-blown details of these buildings will be part of your review. We wanted to make a commitment to you through Mrs. Rumler's testimony. So I have nothing further of Mrs. Rumler this time.
How many square feet living space is there?
I did a very rough calculation for straight-up townhouse, including lower level, we probably about 1,600 to 1,700. And for the stacked townhouse, the one colored in blue, probably 1,400 to 1,500. And the other unit sit on the third floor. That one probably a little bit larger, closer to 1,750.
Any other questions?
Ron?
John?
Is it, in your experience, is it typical to have any outdoor area that's associated with either of the models, a patio or a balcony or any kind of space like that?
Yes, because they will be privately owned. People wanted to have a piece of a backyard patio, enjoy outdoor space.
Could you share with the board how that works with the stacked townhouse model?
For the stacked townhouse, this one by default will have a own grade, and for the other unit, they will not have a patio or deck to project beyond the building footprint.
We could, if it was something that the board felt was appropriate, we could incorporate decks on the second or third floor for those units that do not have ground patios. We've done that.
Mr. Pape, just before we start your planner's testimony, I noticed in Mr. Barry's report, our board planner, that obviously you need a D1 variance, but that is the housing units as proposed, we need a D6 height variance. Are you requesting the D6 tonight as well?
I'm not, and I'm
Okay.
glad that you gave me the opportunity to speak to it. A D6 variance is a height variance. We anticipate that there will be some height relief required, and we anticipate that the maximum height of the building could be 41 feet. But that's measuring that's measuring from the ground up. When Peter Strong has the opportunity to grade this site, and he hasn't yet, the grading will be designed to accommodate these buildings, and we anticipate that the need for a height variance will be dramatically reduced. So we point out that the actual height of these buildings, if we measured from the ground straight up, not following your ordinance does I think it's a median. We do have buildings that reach 41 feet in height, but when we're finished grading, it'll be different. So thanks for the opportunity to speak to that. I don't want to ask for height variance, we'll ask for the wrong one, and then we'll just be back here apologizing. But we know that it'll be less than 41
So
feet.
just to clarify, you're asking for no height variances, whether it's a D6 or a C bulk variance, we'll defer that to site plan.
100%. Sharing with you the designs and sharing with you that it'll be 41 feet or less.
Thank you,
But
Mr.
that we'll
Pape.
have to ask you for that. Just, okay.
I have one last question. Is there basements? No basements?
No, none proposed.
Okay.
Thank you.
proceed,
Then
Peter.
our fourth and final professional witness, thank you, Mrs. Rummer. Our fourth and final professional witness is Allison Coffin. Allison,
Good evening, Ms. Coffin. You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please give us your name, spell your last name for the record.
Allison Coffin, Coffin.
Thank you. Please continue.
So Mrs. Coffin has been here this evening and shared her credentials with you and was accepted as a professional planner. May I be so presumptive, Mr. Chair, to assume that you'll
Her
accept her?
credentials have been accepted.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Coffin, if you would testify this evening as a planner, and I think that the question that Ms. Mancini asked of you earlier was an ideal question. Share with all of us what you did to be prepared this evening to present this testimony to the board.
I reviewed the application. I met with the other professionals on the team. I read your professionals' reports. I looked at the zoning ordinance and the master plan, and I visited the site.
And if you would take us through, what are the applicant's responsibilities to this board? If you could take us through that in a narrative fashion, and then share with us the facts upon which you base your opinions, and most important, your professional opinions.
Sure. Well, the property that we're looking at for this application is an irregularly shaped 8.29 acre parcel that consists of 2 tax lots, and it runs from Route 35 to Crossways Brook. The frontage of the property was previously developed with a nightclub use that has a history of being problematic and has changed identities quite a few times, but it's not currently operating. The rear of the lot is wooded and contains a significant area of wetlands. The lot has a grade change along the frontage that is significant. The nightclub and some of its parking are nearly at grade with the highway, whereas the secondary parking lot that serves the nightclub south of the building is at a lower grade with a stairway that connects the two. The applicant proposes to demolish the nightclub use and redevelop the site with a townhouse development that has a total of 44 two-bedroom units within 7 buildings along a cul-de-sac that enters the site where the grade matches the highway and curves down to the lower grade area for the cul-de-sac itself, and 110 parking spaces are proposed to support these townhouses. Now, the property is zoned B3 highway business, which permits a variety of commercial and public uses, but does not permit townhouse uses, so we are requesting a D variance to allow for this development of the property. It's my opinion that special reasons exist for the granting of the requested use variance, in that the site is particularly suited to the proposed use, and there is no significant detriment that would result to the zone plan or the surrounding properties as a result of granting this variance. The subject site is a unique parcel for the B3 zone in several ways. The site contains significant wetland area to the rear, which prohibit use and development of the property for much of its depth. The upland area of the site has a steep grade change along the frontage on Route 35, which impacts the ability of this site to accommodate many of the permitted use as well. It does lend the site to a townhouse development with one driveway or one access road, providing access to multiple buildings scattered throughout the upland portion of the site at the various grades. The site itself has sufficient depth, even within the area outside of the wetlands, to accommodate townhouses and interior roadway with appropriate and effective setbacks from the highway. The proposed townhouse use on this site makes efficient and appropriate use of what is a challenging piece of property. There is no substantial detriment to the granting of the requested use variance. The proposed use is more appropriate adjacent to the residential neighborhood than the existing use of a nightclub. The proposal eliminates the potential conflict between commercial nightclubs, should this nightclub reopen, and the adjacent residences, particularly those along Fairview Avenue. The noise, odor, and traffic and other potential detrimental impacts will be less than what could be generated by a fully operational nightclub on the site or many of the other permitted uses in the zone. The variances would not substantially impair the intent and purpose of your master plan and zoning ordinance. Though multifamily residential is not a permitted use in the zone, the use is more appropriate for this site, which abuts residential properties, than the pre-existing nightclub use. The proposed conversion of this property to townhouse use advances several goals of the master plan, including Goal 2, which is to continue to encourage the aesthetic and site improvements in the borough's major commercial and industrial areas, and Goal 3, to encourage and promote an improved visual environment and the preservation of natural systems and environmentally sensitive areas. Both those goals are achieved through this application. Now, specific to the B3 zone, the master plan does note that many of the properties in the B3 zones are underutilized and do not project a favorable image for the borough. Reinvestment an improved site and building design, signage, connections between adjoining uses, and improved access management are needed. To improve this district, the borough should investigate utilizing either rehabilitation or redevelopment powers, or a combination of these two powers. That's a pretty heavy thing to say. The master plan also notes that parcels in the B3 zone have sufficient depth to accommodate apartments or townhouses set back from Route 9 or Route 35. Direct access to the regional highway network and public transportation will likely be attractive to young working professionals, and it recommends evaluating the potential for a limited number of condominium-style residential apartments or townhouses on deep properties that adjoin residential uses, which is what this site is. So we take those two comments that the master plan has for the B3 zone together. We have a master plan that is calling for major improvements to the B3 zone where it is underutilized, which would include the subject site's unused nightclub use. The master plan also acknowledges that sites such as this property that we're considering tonight are ideally suited for townhouses. So the suggestion that the borough uses its redevelopment powers or rehabilitation powers to effect improvements in this district indicates to me as a planner that the intent is to create an environment where dramatic and positive change can occur for these properties. And one of the changes hinted at in the master plan for the development of sites such as this one would be for townhouse use. The applicant has in essence proposed to redevelop this site on his own with townhouse uses by way of a use variance rather than wait for the borough to take redevelopment or rehabilitation action on the site. And for that reason, not only does this not impede the intent of your master plan, but it achieves it.
Thank you. As usual, I don't have any questions after Ms. Coffin concludes her narrative presentation. Ms. Coffin is available to the board and the board's professionals if there's any cross-examination.
Anyone from the board have any questions? The board has no questions.
I'm getting used to working with Allison. Mr. Chair, members of the board, that concludes the applicant's direct presentation. After the board opens it to the public and engages in its deliberations, I would ask for a brief opportunity to sum. Thank you.
This application, anyone from the public wish to speak on this application? Sir, come up.
Good evening, sir. Justice Doug, I'm just going to swear you in, get your name and address. You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
And please give us your name, spell your last name.
My name is Jack Tylek, 14 Fairview Avenue, which is
And if you would just spell your last name for us.
Tylek, T-Y-L-E-K.
Thank you. Please continue.
I'm direct neighbor with the property, which is going to be probably developed. And I'm very happy to see that plan because for past years, I'm a resident over there for almost 20 years, 19 years, and for past so many years we had so many problems with the club. So I'm very happy to see the project like this because, you know, it's all residential. Fairview Avenue is just 7 houses. It's a very small street, which is a dead end, and we are very nice and peace, not trouble people over there. And when we got that club, it was always problem, especially weekend, police show up, and basically in that area there is nothing commercial. So that property which you know we're talking about today is basically the one piece which is kind of commercial. And I don't know if you people in the board, you know that property is probably connected directly to the property which is owned by the town. Between that property which will be developed and Ernston Road, the township owns that property, which in the future maybe we can see some kind of nice park for the people. You know, so I'm like very happy to see it, and you know, there is nothing commercial around it, and I will be very happy if the board will approve that, so we will have more peace on that part of the Sayreville. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, I like it. No noise.
Is there anyone else from the public wish to speak on this application? All right, I make a motion to close the public portion. Public portion is closed. Mr. Pate, you want to sum up?
Very briefly, following Allison is a hard act. Following Mr. Tyler is going to be a harder one. I'm going to be very, very brief. When the Rexinis brothers came, who I've had the privilege of representing for 20 years, came and told me that it was their goal to close the nightclub and to find a way to repurpose the property. I was pleased. I know that a lot of people were pleased. When they gave us license to hire people of the caliber that are here this evening, and all the witnesses are terrific. I can tell you, bringing in Minnow and Wasco as the design team and making a commitment to you that that's who's going to design the product, I think was a loud voice saying that they really meant what they were saying. We respectfully ask that the board consider the use variance that will permit the repurposing of this property. It would involve removing the nightclub, abandoning the nightclub as a permitted use, and replacing it only with 44 townhouses, which would be subject to a full site plan review by this board at a later date. So I would ask the board to consider that relief based on the testimony it heard this evening, especially Mr. Tyler's comments this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pate. It's the board's pleasure concerning this application for a use variance.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question. Carl, could you explain what we're approving tonight, basically?
Certainly. It's kind of a two-step process, and we're in step one. So what applicants will often do when there's a site that will require a lot of engineering, which takes a great deal of time and a great deal of cost, they'll come in and ask for the use variance first and then come back with the full details. They've provided what I think is termed a use variance plan, which has a good amount of detail on it, but not the gory details. We don't see exactly how far the building's set back from the property line, every tree, bush, and shrub that you would see in a full site plan. So with that in mind, what they're asking for is just give me tonight the use variance. This use is not allowed in the zone. With certain conditions, for example, the 44 houses, the 2-bedroom units as we discussed. And then if that's approved by the board, then they will come back in the future and give us the full site plan. We'll get into all those details about setbacks and the stormwater system, and all those details will be kind of part two on a separate night if the board approves the use variance. So the consideration for the board is, as Ms. Coffin gave us the testimony, is this use acceptable in this location to the board?
So I guess what we're doing, we're approving that site for 44 condos or townhouses?
Yes.
And that could be built by anybody else too, after this is, if we approve it tonight?
Yes, the condition will be, if the board approves it, is that they need to return for site plan. They can't just go build the use variance because they.
No, I'm saying.
But they could sell this, they could
sell it off to some other developer or whole group. The owners could sell it off to somebody else.
That's correct.
Okay.
If I, Mr. Henry, the intention, not intention, the commitment is that the Rexinises will be back. They will make the presentation. All commitments that were made this evening, I would fully anticipate Mr. Kem will memorialize each and every one and will be bound to every statement that we made. The Rexinises will be the ones who return and work with the board to a conclusion. They're real good at running restaurants. I don't think they've ever built a townhouse. We're going to be looking for someone to either joint venture or to build it for them. It's not what they
I
do.
just wanted to clarify in my own mind
Got
what
it.
we're approving tonight. That's
Got
all.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah. This team is the team that will be back.
Right.
If you give us that opportunity. Thank you.
And it was Minnow and Wasco that did
Minnow
Pier
and
Vi-
Wasco,
Pier-
yeah.
Pier Village?
They the whole thing, they designed the whole thing.
And you were a designer on that?
Yeah, she's
She was,
raising, yeah.
she was a part of the team, architect? Okay. Just my
Palmer.
own, it's really, actually really nice.
Palmer Square in Princeton, too.
Okay.
Way back in the 1700s?
No, no.
One in every
That
crowd.
20, yeah. The whole community where Mediterra is downtown Princeton. It's-
Mr. Chairman, one other question to our attorney. So, are we obligated to approve the site plan? You know, under what conditions could we reject that?
So the site plan, because again, we're a zoning board, so we usually either hand them together. Planning boards frequently get them. So when the site plan comes back, the only kind of pre-approval is that we can't say, no, we don't want townhouses there, we want some other type of use. And that we're allowing them to build up to 44, assuming they can prove to the board and also the board professionals reviewing that they can support the 44 units. They can have sufficient parking. The stormwater management plan will handle 44 units. All those other considerations would allow them to do up to 44. The board still has the ability to deny any bulk variances if they need any. For example, we talked about they may need a height variance. If the board doesn't like the height, they could certainly deny that or give them less height than what they ask for. If they don't meet the specific conditions of the site plan ordinance, such as, amount of landscaping and other aesthetic requirements, the board still has jurisdiction over those. They don't have to approve that. The only thing that's kind of predetermined would be the use variance for the 44 townhomes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
What's the board's pleasure on this application?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the application as presented.
I have a second. I have a motion and a second. I need a roll call.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. Civilli?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
And Mr. Pate, the application's been approved. It will be memorialized at our next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, all board members, on behalf of the Rexinuses and personally, thank you all. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have any idea when you'll be back?
Too late. It's closed.
Any idea when you'll be back?
3-4 months.
Oh, okay, good. All right.
Thank you very much. Good night.
These guys need to stay too.
Yes, you keep the exhibits. Yeah. Do we keep them? No, you keep them. No, give them to Ken. Make Ken hold them. Joe. It's little, that's the obsession for millennium.
Wasn't even close.
I know, me neither.
Just need the memorialization and.
Yeah, you want me to run? You want to just call?
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
You're
always.
welcome.
Look in the tax.
We have one moralization from last meeting. Mr. Kem is going to read it.
Yes, good evening, board members, and I will probably butcher the poor people's last name, Prozarczyk. Prozarczyk, thank you. 17 Albert Street. We heard this last month. It was a homeowner who was essentially putting two additions, one on the front and one on the rear of the yard, which the board approved. It was a corner property on Albert Street and Hensler Lane. All the conditions of the board were placed into the resolution. If there's any questions, I'll certainly answer them. If not, I guess we'll have a motion on the form of the resolution.
Make a motion that we approve the resolution from last month's meeting.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Civilli? Mr. Foley?
Okay. Okay, the last one is, has everyone had the opportunity to look over and review the minutes of April 24th's regular meeting?
Yes? Yes.
What's the board's,
That the minutes be approved?
Second.
minutes from April 24th have been approved? Now I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Meeting's adjourned.
Are they still doing the work down there? Some of the other stuff going on in Long Branch?
That's kind of like a second phase, the different areas. I'm not sure. I know they're trying to copy the architecture so it looks similar. I don't know if they're doing that one, but I've seen their work around the state. It's spent money.
I bet you they're a place that doesn't put all the electric meters out at the end of the building. So it looks like you build these nice places and then it ends up looking like that because we couldn't figure out how to make the meters look nice.
Yeah, sometimes that's good about the utility companies, depending on some of them are tough. You know, they do nice work, they do good stuff.
Who's doing the Asbury